Start the recording. And the same thing applies. So questions ideally in chat in writing so that we know the order, because it's quite difficult to keep track of the raised hand function in Zoom. And then you can post them. If you like to then say them orally as well, that's absolutely fine. And I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Kit Ashton from Goldsmiths, who's going to talk to us about language ideologies through music in the classroom. So it's very appropriate, in fact, straight after this. So it's a good bridge. Kit, the floor is yours.
Salutations, chers amis et collègues, n'importe où que soyez. As we're all very keenly aware, we currently face a huge challenge in actively responding to the endangerment and oppression of languages and their cultural ecologies around the world. And various research and activism has acknowledged some positive uses for music in the language learning classroom or equivalent. Understandably, this is generally focused on benefits for language acquisition, and some scholarship pays a certain amount of attention to the affective and socio-cultural aspects of this alongside the cognitive and linguistic domains. This recognition of the role of affective and socio-cultural domains links directly to what might be described as status planning, incorporating notions of cultural identity and language ideologies, attitudes and motives for learning. But limited research has looked in depth at the role of music in this process, particularly with regard to applied research within an educational context that centres on status planning through music over and above language acquisition. Clearly, in cases where language revitalisation movements are in their infancy, raising the status of the language is the first battle to win. This is arguably where music has the most to offer. Whilst in most contexts language teaching and learning could be done without music, language activism that ignores a culture's music may be neglecting a vital and potentially profound mode of directly engaging with the wider cultural ecology that is so crucial to the establishment and maintenance of linguistic vitality. In this presentation, I will draw on my doctoral research in the British Channel Island of Jèrriais, where I was born and raised. I examine how applied ethnomusicological research has contributed to the process of shaping language ideology, reconstructing cultural identity, and revitalising the critically endangered language of Jèrriais. Jèrriais is a distinct form of Norman unique to Jersey, having evolved locally since roughly 900 AD. It's a Latin-based Romance language influenced by Norse with traces of Celtic, Germanic, and latterly French and English. Jersey today is an urbanised, high-tech offshore finance centre, yet with its own ancient island culture and heritage, natural beauty, and ecological assets. It's a small island with a small and fairly transient population. Jersey sits very close to the French coast, yet it's politically British due to the decision of one Norman knight in the year 1204, believe it or not. Now, as culture shifts in the 21st century, Jersey faces its own questions of identity. Jersey was once trilingual with Jèrriais English and French, but over the past 2 centuries, Jèrriais has declined under Anglicisation. A monoglot modernist mindset, steeped in 19th century coloniality, violently oppressed Jèrriais as a useless peasant's language, presenting the King's English as superior. Jèrriais is now critically endangered, with only a few hundred fluent speakers remaining, and less than 3% of the population with any working knowledge of it. But despite all this, Jèrriais has survived, and recent years have seen the beginnings of revitalisation, thanks to a few key activists and organisations. Some government funding, alongside other fundraising, has established a small-scale education programme, training new teachers and doing some community outreach. Music has been an active part of the strategy, and in 2012 I was commissioned by the local government department for Jèrriais to arrange and record 6 Jèrriais songs in a more current style for teachers to use as a resource. A pop-folk band called Badlabek emerged from this commission and subsequently became a feature of my master's research leading to my doctoral study. As part of this, I was able to leverage my own local profile as the lead singer of Badlabek to set up music workshops in schools centred on Jèrriais singing. My methodology can be characterised as mixed methods autoethnographic research, taking an applied ethnomusicological approach. So I'll just give you a quick definition here. Ethnomusicology can be broadly described as the study of music in its social and cultural contexts. So applied ethnomusicology is an approach that is guided by principles of social responsibility, which extends the usual academic goal of broadening and deepening knowledge and understanding towards solving concrete problems. As mentioned, Badlabek is an amateur pop folk band that grew out of the original commission to re-record songs in 2012. The band is now well established in the local cultural landscape. Performing regularly at festivals and cultural events, releasing recordings and appearing in the local press has raised the profile of the language and helped shape its public image as a living part of local cultural identity. Badlabek's repertoire mixes recontextualized traditional songs, translated pop covers and original songs. These are arranged in an eclectic style that draws on pop and folk influences from around the world. This clip is taken from a promotional video publicizing the recent album Cocolancia, meaning cock-a-doodle-doo.
La mat Sainte Catherine jusqu'à Piopo. La mat Sainte Catherine jusqu'à Piopo. Racine déjà, il va crier Coco, Coco lâché. Décroche la lune et puis l'agneau. Coco, Coco lâché.
The school project involved working with Jersey's State School Music Service to teach the song Mon beau petit Jèrriais, also known as Beautiful Jersey, to 280 children from 10 different classes across 6 primary schools. The reason I chose this song was because it is in fact the most well-known Jèrriais song, and indeed it's become a kind of anthem for Jersey, used at large cultural occasions like sporting events, giving it a particular connection to cultural identity. I decided to make a creative video resource in order to help enthuse the children, and as you can imagine, our singing toad friend agent Kiemontin and the mission to save Jèrriais proved to be very popular. The 2 videos produced were made available on YouTube, so the children could practice at home as well as in school or whenever they wished. I should just mention at this point that the Jersey toad, a unique species of Bufo spinosus, has long been an emblem of the island, and Jersey people have historically been referred to as crapo or toads across the Channel Islands. So here's a short clip.
Hello, my friends. I'm Agent Kiemontin of the Special Toad Service. But now, my friends, now we face a mission that may well be beyond us, unless you all get on board and join us in the quest. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to save Jèrriais! Now, Jèrriais, in case you don't know, is Jersey's own special ancient language, spoken here for hundreds of years. Just like the Jersey toad, it is unique to our little island. Over 1,000 years ago, when the Vikings invaded the north of France, they brought their ancient Norse language.
Skjegel! Skalmel! Skilder klovner! Skjegel! Skalmel! Skilder klovner!
And mixed it with the local version of Latin, which had arrived hundreds of years before with the Romans.
Quo igitur patientius perseverabimus, eo maiore victoria.
The languages combined, and in time Jèrriais evolved from there. It's older than English and French, and we've got hundreds of stories and poems and songs in Jèrriais that are unique to our little island. But if no one knows how to speak the language, they will be lost forever. So, my friends, just what can we do? Well, one of the best ways to learn a language is through music. So, I've recruited the help of a local musician, Kit Ashton, to help us on our way. And I'm really hoping he can do a bit more than just play spy guitar. Okay, very good.
All the classes engaged very well and ended up giving a performance of the song in a school assembly. At least one Jèrriais teacher also came into each school to give out a special certificate of achievement, signed by Agent Kemontin, of course, and tell the children about further opportunities to learn Jèrriais. I wasn't actually able to film the performances, but I can give you a sense of what they were like, because the next phase of my research involved forming a choir of volunteers to publicly perform the same song at a later date. These singers were largely drawn from the school workshops. This performance actually took place on Liberation Day, which is the annual celebration of Jersey's liberation from Nazi occupation in 1945. In fact, the main reason this song has become so well known is because it's always sung on this day. The song gained an increased popularity and poignancy during the harsh occupation years, when it was often sung at community gatherings to help boost morale under the difficult conditions of Nazi rule. Our version was deliberately upbeat in contrast to the slower and more sentimental arrangements that are often performed. So let's take a quick look at the theory behind this work. First, I'm working with the idea that both culture and cultural identity are always evolving and constructed through time. Identity is obviously an important aspect of status planning. The crucial question of why bother saving the language is profoundly dependent upon the way that the language is linked to a collective sense of cultural identity. The more strongly a community identifies with the language, the greater the motivation to keep it alive. Music is, of course, a unique mode of public engagement and a powerful medium of identity construction. Many scholars have written about music and identity and why music is so effective in shaping identity. Some of the most well-known examples being Simon Frith, Martin Stokes, Tjeerd de Graaf, and David Hesmanhuis. Here's a quote from Simon Frith. "Music constructs our sense of identity through the direct experience it offers the body, time, and sociability, experiences which enable us to place ourselves in imaginative cultural narratives." So whether for good or for ill, musical sounds can communicate, mobilize, and organize individual and collective identities in context. It is this unique ability to combine moving the body, stirring the heart, and sparking the imagination that makes music one of the most powerful ways to weave language into a community's sense of itself. The main aim of my research in Jersey is to explore new ways to use an applied methodology to help the community shift and develop its language beliefs and foster a genuine grassroots identification with Jèrriais that embraces the language in a lasting manner. And whilst I'm still writing up my findings, so I'm yet to draw my final conclusions from the data, it seems clear that my work in Jersey schools has generated a significant amount of encouraging ethnographic material. During the first workshops, it became clear that a large proportion, including a majority of children in some classes, had no idea that Jèrriais even existed. So across these sessions, the children appeared to engage with Jèrriais in 3 progressive stages relating to cultural identity and language beliefs. I've described them as moments of encounter, characterized by a sense of difference, meeting with a form of other; moments of process, which was a more liminal state where feelings and beliefs are in a form of flux or creative sense-making; and moments of connection, where there is some evidence of a newly forged positive attachment, a form of identification with Jèrriais. I'll just give you a brief sense of the kind of ethnographic evidence that emerged in the classroom. Here's a humorous example of encounter. So, cha is an important word, that means heart. Everybody say cha. Cha. Excellent. Now, I know the Jèrriais word that looks a little bit like chew, but don't say chew, because that's the Jèrriais word for gum. Yeah. And especially when you find out that this line means you are very close to my heart, you definitely don't want to get it wrong. Okay? Don't want to get that one mixed up, do you? In processing the idea of revitalization, there was also an element of uncertainty or even anxiety in coming to terms with Jèrriais as a language of Jersey identity. For example, one student seemed to suggest that if Jèrriais had been better preserved, the island wouldn't be English today. Well, that's another good question. Do you think that you have to choose between either having English or Jèrriais, or is it possible to have both? Yeah, because who here speaks another language already? Like Portuguese or Polish? Yeah, exactly. So, and how many is the maximum amount of languages you can fit in your brain? As many as you like, as many as you've got space for in your brain. Some people speak 10 languages.
I speak one.
By the end of the project, I received a number of interesting positive comments that reveal evolving language ideologies. For example, these two.
At first I thought that it was going to be really boring and I didn't really want to do it, but then we got into it, I started wanting to do it, and now I'm confident about it and I want to speak it.
Wow.
At first I thought that we were like speaking gibberish, just talking some weird language that I didn't know existed. And then now that we've actually sang the song, it's actually a really beautiful language.
Oh. And this moment from a student I'm calling Kevin, who took the mission so much to heart that he and his mum independently discovered Jèrriais classes. Kevin has since gone on to attend lessons in a committed way, even bringing his sister along. Yep.
I think it was about a month or two ago, they had a special day at the library which I went to.
Did you? Cool.
Even though it's where I got to my study.
That's awesome. Did you enjoy it? Yeah. Excellent. Did you learn some Jèrriais?
But I am going to Jèrriais lessons.
Wow. What, at Springfield or where? At Springfield. Fantastic. That is really cool. Of course, there's an inherent difficulty in interpreting the evolving status of these children's identity narratives, and an inevitable probability that they are at least to some extent saying what they think I want to hear. But over several sessions, the relational network of co-participation in the classroom community centered around one song, which provided an embodied, social, aesthetic, musical, and linguistic experience. As the facilitator present with them throughout, my ethnography supports the interpretation that there were genuine feelings of identification on a scale from minimal to fairly intense. No matter how deep-rooted those feelings may be, the experience of taking part in the project, learning the song and performing it together in an assembly took many children on a positive journey, from encounter via process to connection with Jèrriais. This shaped language ideology and increased the chance of Jèrriais forming part of their cultural identity in the longer term. That may not ever manifest in much outward action, but depending on their particular social influences and future environmental factors, these children may grow up to become Jèrriais allies at least, if not fluent speakers. Naturally, this will rely on many more projects and positive initiatives that will add to their onward journey. This one music project was only ever going to take them so far. But for some of these children, this project served either as a catalyst for an already existing identification with Jèrriais, or an introduction to the language that has sparked a genuine interest and enthusiasm to continue. Their experiences had varying levels of significance and intensity, likely spanning from the more or less inconsequential to generic positivity to Kevin's infectious dedication. Given my focus on raising the status of Jèrriais and engaging with language beliefs rather than simply pursuing language acquisition, the project appears to have achieved many of its aims. However, there are ongoing challenges in transforming positive language beliefs into continuing linguistic engagement. So, while the project serves as an important example of music's contribution to status planning, such projects can only do so much in isolation. In conclusion, today Jèrriais faces an identity crisis, grappling with the choice between revitalizing and maintaining its own cultural distinctiveness, or the much easier slide towards being more like a generic seaside town of the south of England. But music has provided a unique form of cultural interaction through which the communal negotiation of identity and language beliefs is occurring. As shown, this can happen in the school environment in a focused way, demonstrating positive potential for future work. This will be most effective when combined strategically with specific and ongoing language acquisition opportunities. Of course, there are many dangers and challenges here which I don't have time to explore. Central to these is my own positionality as a researcher activist working in the complex and often conflicted context of my home soil. As an international finance centre and tax haven, the economy of Jersey itself is deeply implicated in the neo-colonial project of neoliberalism. As such, there is a real political danger of the revival of Jèrriais being subsumed into renegotiated patterns of social control. This could either take the form of overt exclusive nationalism, or perhaps more likely in the form of what Charles R. Hale called neoliberal multiculturalism, tolerated and strategically used as an image-enhancing token of cosmopolitan diversity and cultural cachet, but limited, kept in place and prevented from achieving true and widespread organic cultural revitalization of a decolonial kind. In other words, simultaneously valorized and devalued, with the unique epistemological and ontological riches of our culture instrumentally put to work and plundered, or perhaps just erased, by the very coloniality that threatened Jèrriais in the first place. Nevertheless, despite these puzzles, my ethnography so far is indeed supportive of my fundamental thesis, that applied ethnomusicological interventions can be an integral part of language revitalization strategies, as they offer significant potential to help communities shift and develop language beliefs and foster genuine grassroots identifications with their own languages and cultures. Music can help this to happen, both within and beyond the classroom. Merci ben d'effet.
Thank you, Kit. That was an amazing talk. Absolutely beautiful, well produced. So now we have time for questions. So do write them in the chat here. Radu has a question. Do you want to pose it also orally using audio?
Yes, just a second. Okay. I think hi. Thank you so much for this. That's fascinating. And what I wanted to say from the very beginning is that we all know that music has been used in language teaching for many years, especially in foreign languages teaching, for different reasons. Yeah, it's engaging, it's attractive, it's rhythm, it's everything, helps memorizing words and patterns of languages, and also, and of course, it makes a lot of sense to use it in relearning a language. Yes, in efforts of language reclamation or revitalization, something, and that's excellent. And what is more fascinating about your projects is the fact that they come to confirm that successful language reclamation, as I was saying in the morning, cannot be achieved solely by language documentation. I mean, by documentation that is solely linguistics. So your effort, or the outcomes of the effort, are double. I mean, methodologically, it's a very good thing, a very good practice, but at the same time adds to the documentation of culture by introducing this element and everything that music can bring, which is not only music. Yeah, so it can bring more. Excellent. One observation that I would like to make, which is not directly related, is when what was that, the frog?
Toad.
The toad. That was, again, excellently explained for children. So how the language came to the island and changed and evolved. Now, one thing that I not agree with is to say that the two languages combined. From a linguist point of view, the language is a Romance language, as you said, with a Germanic substratum. I would say. So when the Normans had already switched to French, when they went over the channel, and they were speaking a variety of French, a Neo-Latin language, most probably heavily influenced by their own language, but that's a matter of substratum. So we don't really use the things like mixed languages or combined languages in this one. But
that actually leads to the question about the production of the video. So I guess they're simplifying things to make it.
Of course, yeah.
So
the question is, I completed. The question is, can we find ways to explain this to children, or is it better to leave it like this because it doesn't really much
Thanks, Radu. I'll let Kit answer that, and then we take a couple of other comments and questions from the chat. Thank you, Radu. So what do you say, Kit?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess there's two sort of things to comment just briefly back on. Firstly, there's that point about the wider cultural ecology and, you know, all the different aspects of food, dance, even much deeper aspects of epistemology and ontology that's unique to a worldview that gets lost in the process of oppressing people's cultures. So yeah, music is one of those great ways to help bring those connections back, and it's a very public thing, but it can also become a very private thing that people take into their home. So, and then on the second point, of course, I'm not a linguist, so I really appreciate you making that point, Radu, and I'd be very grateful for any suggestions that folks may have for if there are perhaps better ways of phrasing that for children, or indeed for adults. So yeah, in just understanding that. So thank you for that, and please do give me any suggestions that you may have.
Great.
No,
the toad was super cool, though. I will take one more question quickly from the chat. So Manuel has excellent comments, so perhaps Kit, you can read those later because there are more comments and questions. But Sarah, do you want to pose your question using audio?
Yes, of course, thanks. Brilliant presentation. Thank you, Kit. So my question was, what inspired your study into this specific Jèrriais language? Was it just the prior background you have in the region, or was it a different reason? So I've suggested maybe you believe Jèrriais, above other minority languages, is in urgent need of revitalization, thus you chose it, or maybe it's because it has high cultural importance to the region, so you think it's essential to maintain. Just wondered what your kind of main motivation was behind that.
Sure, no, thanks. That's a good question, which simply comes down to the fact that a bit of luck and a bit of family background. So my gran spoke Jèrriais, and in fact, she only spoke French and Jèrriais until she went to school in the sort of early 1900s, or in the 20s, I think she probably started school. And then it was literally beaten out of the kids. You could be beaten if you spoke Jèrriais at school. Which is a pure English environment, and so she didn't pass it on to my dad, and I didn't grow up with it. So I came to it partly by chance, because I returned to the island. I'd been away working as a professional musician in the UK, and I returned to the island for a period to be with family and whatnot, and that's when I got that commission, and I kind of took it out of interest, but also because it was a paid gig, if I'm really honest. And then it was from there that I became a convert, I suppose, myself to the value of it. And because it is my culture, there is that family connection, and obviously it's my home island. It was the thing to do, certainly over and above, say, Jèrriais, which is our rival island's form of Norman. So yeah, that's really the story, and like I say, it sort of turned into this master's thesis, and then amazingly I've got funding to do this PhD, which is I'm so grateful for. So that's basically my journey.
Thank you, Kit. That's great. I have so many questions about the focus group interviews with the kids, but I'm not going to ask them. I'm going to get in touch separately. And instead, I'm going to introduce Tjeerd de Graaf from the Mercator Centre, Fryske Akademy, who's going to talk to us about educational materials for endangered languages. And that's all I'm going to say. Tjeerd, I'll let you talk about it, because it's Siberian, but it's also other languages, right?
Okay. Well, I start do you see my screen?
So we can see a big Zoom window and a very small window with the slide. So maybe you click the first slide. There we go. Now we can see it. Yeah.
This is the first slide.
Yeah, great. We can see it.
With the title of my talk. And I'm very happy to join this conference. It's amazing to see familiar faces and not have to travel over large distances. I think this is for FEL an opportunity to organize conferences in the future where we meet with people from all over the world. Well, my talk will be related to the educational material which we developed in our fieldwork with endangered languages. And in the first place, I should like to tell you something about my own background, which is related to the work of the Fryske Akademy. It's the institution in the province of Friesland in the Netherlands, where we have a minority which is to a certain extent endangered. And the Mercator Centre is involved in projects on minority languages in Europe in principle, but I'll show you that we are also expanding to other parts, namely to the east. And then I'll tell you something about the work we have been doing with minority languages in the Russian Federation, and develop from the data which we get from archives, in particular sound archives, didactical methods for the teaching of those languages. So the Mercator Centre is situated in the province of Friesland, as I said. It's a documentation and information centre. It was funded by the European Union. It's still continuing as institution of the province and the municipality of the town of Leeuwarden, and we produce certain research projects on all kinds of topics. The so-called regional dossiers, we have at the moment about 50 of these regional dossiers, which describe the educational situation of certain minorities in mainly in the European Union, but as I said, we are also expanding to the east. So this is a map which shows the place where we can have a location of one of these minority languages, and you see there is also one in the northwestern part of Siberia. It's about the Nenets language. We have a new one about the Udmurt language, which is one of the minority languages of Russia. And the idea is that Mercator will expand its activities to other parts of the Eurasian continent, and maybe also in the very far eastern part of it, where we have done our fieldwork, about which I'm going to tell you more in a later stage of the talk. So this is, for instance, the latest example. You see it's also published in Russian in order to make it available for public in the Russian Federation. It contains all kinds of details on the language, on in particular the teaching of the language. And as I said, this is the first edition of such a dossier on one of the languages of Russia, but the next one is the Udmurt, and there will be other of these publications available in the coming period. So this is as a way of introduction, and my task in the Fryske Akademy, where I am working after my retirement from the University of Groningen, is also to establish more of these contacts with countries, in particular in the parts of the Russian Federation. Here you see a map of the peoples of Russia, in particular the peoples of Siberia, and our work has been mainly done in the very eastern part on the peninsula of Kamchatka and on the island of Sakhalin, where we have been working with minor languages. They are Eurasian languages. Some of them are quite substantial, not very endangered, but some of them at the border of becoming completely extinct. For instance, Yukagir is one of these languages, and I'll tell you more about the Nif language, which is located on the island of Sakhalin, where we have done our fieldwork. And I'm going to report on this fieldwork and also on the collection of data which we have obtained from all the speakers of the Nif language, and how this material can be used for educational purposes when in the schools the children are taught about the language, about the heritage. And as you might know, in most of these cases, and that's true in many parts of the world, the young generation doesn't know anymore of the language. They learn it from the grandparents who still have some knowledge. That are the famous projects by Leon Hilton with the Californian Indian people, and similar things could also be undertaken in these areas of the eastern part of Russia. So here is something about these sound archives where we have been working. There are many recordings, and these are the oldest recordings, which also represent languages which in many cases are no more spoken. And therefore it is also interesting for the people who are still belonging to a particular ethnic group, that they learn about their heritage, about not only the language, but also about the music, about the songs. We have, for instance, that's related to what we have seen this evening in this Pushkinske Dom, is a large collection on Yiddish also. And we had the project also on Yiddish recording in these facilities. So the reconstruction of these old sound recordings is one of the projects. Here you see the way they have been recorded in very early times. And we have a scientific collaboration with the phoneticians and the linguists in St. Petersburg in order to reconstruct this material. Here is, for instance, a historical picture of how the old wax cylinders were used for making recordings of the language. And we made collections of these phonograms available, the recordings, the descriptions, in a catalog which has been published in St. Petersburg. We have also had a project which was financially supported by the Endangered Archives program of the British Library on the reconstruction of sound materials of the endangered languages, mainly also from private collections. These private collections are in fact more endangered still than the collections in phonogram archives. It's already long ago, but I just mention it as a result of our project. For the data in these collections can be used for educational purposes. One of the results of our latest project, which was also supported by the Endangered Archives Foundation in the British Library, is a book, and in this book there is also a chapter on the use of sound archives for the investigation, teaching and safeguarding of endangered language in Russian. So much for these recordings. And then in the last 20 years, we have been able to do fieldwork in the very east of the Eurasian continent, so in the very far parts of Siberia, and in particular on the island of Sakhalin. Together with a Japanese expedition, we were able to visit the island, and since then I had several projects to record the language from old speakers, to do further research also in other parts of Siberia, about which I also have reported on several of the FEL conferences. And in recent years, my graduate student Hidetoshi Shiraishi is continuing this work, and he is still active on the island of Sakhalin to record the Nif language. Here you see a picture of our Japanese expedition to Sakhalin, which was organized, as I said, by the Japanese Monbusho, and we were more or less the first visitors of the island after the long period of isolation. And since then, there have been several possibilities to do fieldwork. Here you see that we record a lady who was a teacher of Nif, who was reading a book which was used for educational purposes to show the children how the language was spoken, and not only the language, but also all kinds of details on the culture. For instance, here a picture of the musical culture which was shown to us. This activity took mainly place in the center of the island of Sakhalin, which is the town of Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, which before the war was a Japanese town, Toyohara, and you see still remnants of the Japanese history in this building, which is the Sakhalin Museum of Regional Studies, and that is a very good contact point for the researchers who visit the island and who do the research. And I took part in several of the conferences which were undertaken there. The last one was 4 years ago, and on that occasion we also made a trip to the north of the island, where we visited the places where the author Chekhov has been working, who also in his book of 1890 describes the situation of the island, which were more or less a kind of gulag in the time of the Tsarist Empire. So let me see, then here you see how we have been teaching the possibilities how to use modern equipment to the teachers of NIF. So here are a number of ladies and a few of my colleagues from St. Petersburg who were with us, and we had a very nice possibility and a very good workshop where we showed the possibilities how to use modern phonetic technology to learn the language and to teach the language. And from that we also had the possibilities to interview the informants, to produce all kinds of teaching methods. And here's a lady, she is a teacher of the Herzen Institute in St. Petersburg, and she shows us about the NIF language, which contains very interesting sounds. Also, there are several K sounds which are not in Russian. So the problem is how to teach the language which has sounds which do not exist in the official language, which was always the language also by used in schools and by the children. Here you see a lady who is a representative of the NIF, and she explains us, so it was also for us, it was an interesting situation that we could learn about the various dialects, about the way they used certain graphemes. In the past, it was used a Latin alphabet in the 30s, when the language for the first time was presented in writing. In recent times, there is this Cyrillic alphabet with certain diacritic signs, and here she instructs us how to pronounce these sounds and how to make certain distinctions. This is the fieldwork we had with all the people in the north of Sakhalin. This is my colleague Hidetoshi Shiroishi, who is at the moment working in Hokkaido University and still continuing his work with informants in Sakhalin, where he produces also certain teaching methods, which I'm going to show here. This is a number of books, there are more than 10 of these books. In these books, he describes the sound material which has been recorded. So the first recording was maybe 15 years ago, and this is one of the booklets published, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, and this is the 11th edition. And in this book, there is a CD containing the interviews and the written version of the stories which have been told and which you can listen to on this DVD, and where you can compare the NIF language with the Russian translation and also with the Japanese translation, with an English translation. And that's a very similar activity as which is going on in the organization which I'm now presenting. It's the Foundation for Siberian Culture. The Foundation for Siberian Cultures was established in 2010 by my colleague Erich Kasten. He is living north of Berlin, and he has a whole institution in the small town of Fürstenberg, where there is a library, where he also organizes seminars, invites people from these eastern parts of Russia. Even a whole singing group was performing there for the local people. And all over Germany, he organizes also special exhibitions of the material culture. He's an ethnologist, so not in particular working with the language, but also with the material culture. So what we, in this program of the foundation study, and what we try to stimulate is also the production of booklets, production of exhibitions, video chips for the language, and to show not only the language, but also the traditional culture. And within this project, and that's related to the endangered languages, there are special language courses, special DVD learning tools for the preservation of the culture of certain of these Kamchatka languages, and also our work on the Nif language will be included in the program of this center foundation for Siberian cultures. Here you find the background information about it, the members of it, and if everything works, I can now click on this and make it visible what is organized in what he calls the Kulturstiftung Siberian, which when I have to oh yeah, this is in German, so I can shift to other languages. There is an edition in English, which I'll use, and you can also shift to Russian, to Japanese or French, but that's also what we are going to develop in the future. So there is a Japanese version in the booklets by Hidetoshi, and he will work with the Japanese edition, but this is multilingual presentation of all the work of the Foundation for Siberian Cultures. You see the objectives. The foundation is dedicated to maintaining cultural diversity in Siberia and the Russian Federation, and in the Far East in particular. The foundation documents endangered languages, indigenous ecological knowledge, and art and craft traditions. So it's rather broad, but there is a particular part of it which is devoted to the language, which I'm going to show you now. The foundation is participating in efforts to counteract the loss of cultural diversity, as well as the local and ethnic identities. So what I'm going to show you is something which is related to the ethnography, and from the ethnography, in this map, which is on the ethnographies, you can see which languages are represented at the moment, and we hope to expand it to other languages in the Russian Federation. So here are the Nenets, and there will also be a program on the Nenets. There are programs on the Koryak, but of course, it's not yet complete, for we started only a few years ago, and Erich Kasten is working mainly on Kamchatka. And as I say, we have a project on Sakhalin, and this will be all combined in the presentation, which is in this Foundation for Siberian Cultures, and this part of the new Northern language exhibition. And at the moment, I think I have still about 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
okay?
yeah, 5 more minutes and then 5 minutes for questions, which would be okay. Yeah.
I have part of the demo, so you can look it up. The website is available. When you look for Foundation for Siberian Cultures, you easily get to it, and you get all these details on the various ethnic groups. So there are the Uralic languages, the Turkic languages, Eskimo Aleut languages. You see also Udmurt will be represented. The Nanai is already represented, and here are the for us, for me personally, most interesting languages. So here's the Nif. There will be the collection we prepared with Hidetoshi Shiraishi, and I'll show you something on the Itelmen language. The Itelmen language is a language spoken on the peninsula of Kamchatka, where my colleague Erich Kasten has done his fieldwork. So not only the language, but mainly also the material culture. And he produced very nice details, so you can click further to books about it, about the natural resources. There is a whole film about a special festival which is organized. And what I'm going to show you is something which is related to the Itelmen language. So we get to the next part. This is completely a description of what's going on underneath the Itelmen language. Erich Kassen is working there since, you see, 1993, so already more than 20 years. He is involved in all kinds of projects, like we are involved in projects on Sakhalin, and we hope to go on with it and also to make all these data available. And what I'm going to show you now is one of the small short films. Here are old ladies who are still having a good command of the Itelmen language, and they all tell stories, they all remember certain things of their childhood, and that is all represented in this DVD, in this, and this is a short film where you can listen to a short fragment of the Itelmen language, which is also from the point of view of can you hear it? Probably
it's very quiet, but I'm sure people can explore
anyhow,
this
the
resource
Itelmen
later
language
as well.
for not only for the people, of course, it's very important that the people can have access to this material and learn about the language, learn about certain customs, learn about the culture. But for the scientific world, it's also very interesting. For this Itelmen language has clusters of 7 consonants. So for a phonetician, it's a very interesting language. You can find details when you click further, and you find a booklet, which is also printed. You can ask it printed, but it is also presented in PDP form. And as a PDP, you can look at it and find it's, of course, in Russia. For it is for the local people who are also presenting teaching facilities for children. Here's, for instance, one of the ladies which I showed you just now, and she tells here something about her youth. So about her youth, she's telling things. And the text is in the Itelmen language. You see, when you know Cyrillic, that there are certain diacritics in order to make distinction between the uvular and the velar k sounds, for instance, aspirated k. The same happens in many of these languages. So for phoneticians, I'm a phonetician, it's very interesting to study the sounds of these languages. But of course, the main task of this project is also to make it available to young people who learn about the language. So for the scientific world, it's interesting, but also for the local people. And here you find the translation into Russian, but also in English. And as I said, for the NIF, the work by Jèrriais, it's also in Japanese. So we hope to expand our work to other languages, other minority languages, and maybe also find a larger public for all these activities. I think this is nearly the end of my talk. I just want to go back to this. Here you see once more the survey of people who are involved. This is the address, and there is a website which you can find. So I thank you very much for your attention. Oh no, this is not what I was intending to do. I just had to click further. Thank you very much for your attention. Спасибо за ваше внимание.
Spasiba, thank you, Tjeerd. I've used this resource in teaching British students about languages of Russia, and it's excellent. So just to tell you that, I'm going to first have Sarah pose her question. Maybe Sarah, you want to pose it using audio?
Yes, sure. Thank you for another really informative presentation. I'm unsure whether you did mention this. I'm sorry if you did, just because I couldn't hear the audio for a second. But you mentioned that you were very interested in, sorry, I'll probably pronounce it wrong, the NIV language. I was just curious, for what reasons do you find that one so distinctive in comparison to its sort of linguistic peers that you mentioned?
I didn't understand your question. Can you repeat it again? It's very, I don't, it's not loud enough here in my place.
Oh,
Sorry.
I asked, you mentioned that the Niv language, above the other languages you are making studies of, was for you the most interesting or most striking. I wondered for what reasons that was.
So I can also repeat that. Did you hear that one, Tjeerd?
Yeah,
So,
I understand your question. Yes, it's more or less quite by coincidence that I came in contact with the Niv people. We had an expedition with the Japanese colleagues in order to look for the remnants of the Ainu language, and the Ainu language is also a very interesting isolate language which is still spoken on Hokkaido, but in the past it was also spoken on Sakhalin. So with this Japanese expedition, Sakhalin, and the main minority language we found there was the Niv language. It is not the most interesting language for me personally, but in a certain sense, it is very interesting. People like linguists like Austerlitz and other important American scholars have been working on Niv, but you can say the same for instance, for Yukagir or for Itelmen. And Itelmen, as I said, was from the point of view of phonetics also very interesting. But I use the Niv also as an example of a language which has 4 different k sounds, k, 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 which are distinctive. And then my Chomsky colleagues told me that's impossible. But I say that's the reality. There is a language where this is a distinction which exists, but in the schematic approach of the phonologist in my active time in the university, the people told me that it's impossible. But I think, but you have to see what is the reality. This is what's happening, and the theories can make nice theories, but if the practical situation is different, then you have to change your theory.
yeah, that's an excellent answer. So yes, it's a micro family or an isolate, I guess, and then it's really fascinating phonetically. There's one more quick question we can take. So Tobias, do you want to make the comment using audio?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the very interesting presentation and this invaluable work that you're doing on the archival sources and in making them usable again by the for the communities. I was just curious that in the map and on the list of languages, I couldn't find Anats. Is there a reason why Anats is missing, or on what basis did you select the Russian peoples and languages you would work on?
Honestly speaking, I have no good answer for this question. I think you're right. Enes, Ngalasan, and this whole group of Samiot languages is very important to mention. So my colleague Erich Karsten made this list, and I'm not remembering what exactly the reason was why he did not mention it. Maybe he just forgot it. I'm very sorry for that. But
it's often forgotten in the Uralic circles, I can say, unfortunately.
Yeah, there are more people. So I just borrowed these slides from Erich Karsten, and I only showed those languages which are at the moment represented and which he especially involved. And we just plan to expand the whole thing to Niv and to the languages. But other people who are working on these Uralic languages, and particularly the Samoyed languages, they are welcome to join somehow and to write us, and also maybe contact us and add their collections to the website of this organization. You find it on the web, and you can have access to it, and you can contact us about it.
Thank you, Tjeerd. Maybe you can put the link in the chat again, Tjeerd, and And yes, it's not a complete, it's not meant to be a complete map, if I'm not mistaken. It's just the resources that have been collected so far.
Yeah.
I'd like to move on to the next talk, our final talk of the day. So we have Ari Sherris and Colleen O'Brien, who are going to talk to us about multilingual dictionaries in two very different places, Ghana and Indonesia. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, thank you. First of all, I'm talking from Texas, and I would like to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Karankawa, the sacred land of the Karankawa, who are no longer here. So Anie Wabo, which is welcome in Safaliba, to exploring the uses of multilingual dictionaries among the Safaliba in Ghana and the Gorontalo in Indonesia. So the Safaliba dictionary is an offline dictionary. It's in small buku, as the Safaliba would say, a little book that they photocopy. And the Gorontalo dictionary is online. At the end of our talk, Colleen, my colleague, will draw a few comparisons. So let me expand the screen. I was afraid I would lose everyone. Okay, that works. The Safaliba English Pedagogical Dictionary was created in 2014 by two Safaliba activists, Edin Kosiaku and Mahamma Kokchi, and two allies, Paul Schaefer and me. Like approximately 50 other little books that have been produced since then, the dictionary has never been published. Instead, it is photocopied and stapled by teacher activists and allies like myself and Paul, pushing aside what some might call the oppressive state indigenous language, Gonja, to teach Safaliba. An excerpt from the dictionary is on the slide, as is the list of official Ghanaian languages, indigenous languages, for which there have been books developed, published, and distributed, together with professional development for early childhood teachers teaching reading in those languages. All of that was done between 2004, those books, and the professional development for teachers, between 2004 and 2019, totaling $98 million US. Ghanaian state early childhood education includes a 2-year kindergarten program for 4 to 6-year-old pupils and is followed by a primary 1 to 3 program for 6 to 9-year-old pupils. It's a transitional early exit bilingual program where from primary 4 up through university, the medium of instruction is English, English, and more English, of course. Up to 40% of the world's population do not access education in a language they understand, according to UNESCO, a UNESCO report from 2016, and Ghana is no different. But the Safaliba activists are trying to make a difference with their small language. Let me talk a little bit about that before I get to the actual pedagogical activities. There are approximately 29.3 million Ghanaians living in Ghana, the majority of whom do not speak any one of Ghana's indigenous languages as a majority group. As a people, Ghanaians speak 81 different indigenous languages, of which 81 languages, of which 73 are indigenous to Ghana, 8 are non-indigenous, and Safaliba is one of 64 indigenous languages that is not officially taught in K3 reading and writing classes. The Safaliba people number approximately 7,000 to 9,000, and their language is the dominant communicative mode in the first 7 towns that I've listed, and a subordinate language in the second 7 towns. And that gray area is the Safaliba land where most of the farmers in their traditional lands work the farms. They're subsistence farmers. Here is an example of why children might use dictionaries in these Safaliba classrooms. Each day after shared reading activities with farmer teacher activist Samua Mango Aworo, a primary 1 teacher in 2015, and he moves up with this class, and then starts back at primary 1 after he finishes primary 5 or 6. The children use drawings and invented spelling to capture their thoughts on a theme related to a little book under consideration by the children. The first line of Safaliba writing is what a child wrote on my slide, and the line underneath it is what the teacher wrote after asking the child what it says. The child wrote, "I'm changing the lorry's oil." The child got a few sound letter or grapheme phoneme links correct, it seems, for the onset grapheme phoneme link that are reasonable, the mung, which is correct, and the s, which is close to the ch. The s, of course, is difficult at this age, even for native speakers of this language, and they're all very orate. The na matches the na, of course, if you see it that way, as she ran her letters together. One of the pedagogical activities which is described for teachers both in Safaliba and how to use it and in English is an acrostic poem. These are examples. The two acrostic poems with two children's names in bold. Because the dictionary is a bilingual dictionary, the children can do this activity in both languages, and the dictionary helps them immensely. The Safaliba translates to, "I am respectful, my book is interesting, I am an honest person, I do not have a bad feeling about anyone." This is a classic two-way information gap task, which again is described. Instructions are given for teachers in both Safaliba and English in the dictionary. It's used in second language acquisition research and in second language teaching, where children are paired off and decide who is pupil A and who is pupil B. Pupil A and B receive the same blank crossword puzzle with a different half of the answers filled in. They are instructed not to show each other their crossword puzzles. However, pupil A might only have the across clues listed on their paper and no answers for those, while pupil B might only have the down clues listed and no answers for those. They talk to one another and ask questions. If you have access to the internet, which is not often the situation in Safaliba land, you can create these quickly or have students create them on this website, and I'll put it in the chat later, which creates pages with equal numbers of down and across for each partner. I haven't checked it out to see if it takes the Safaliba alphabet. It may. So slide 8, jumbled words, again, these are described in Safaliba and in English in the dictionary, is pretty self-explanatory. Children might select a few words from the dictionary, jumble the letters, and exchange them with each other to solve them. This is another two-way information gap activity used in SLA research, second language acquisition research. Students select a partner, students decide who is student A and who is student B again. They then get a table with words from the dictionary in different cells, or they make these. They are instructed not to show each other their tables while they discuss the tables with each other, discover the differences between them, and fill in the missing information. When they think they've discovered all the differences and filled them all in, creating identical tables, they request an answer key to check their work. It's also fun for students to make these from dictionary words. It could be bilingual too. You can mix them up. The Safaliba are very flexible on that. There isn't any kind of purism that's running, at least among the, well, there is some of that among the elders, but not really among the teachers. There are spot the difference pictures in the dictionary, which were done by a Ghanaian artist, Safaliba artist. And these are used for a variety of purposes. Since they do have some differences, you can again do an information gap activity where students don't show each other their pictures, and they talk about them and ask questions and guess what is different about each picture. And there are a few of these. There's another one that the artist drew for the dictionary. Ania Toma, thank you. And my colleague will take questions at the end. My colleague will continue from here. She wants to share her PowerPoint. Can we change that out now?
So I've stopped your sharing, and I think, Colleen, you'll be able to share now.
Okay.
At the bottom, you'll find the share screen.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to talk to y'all about an app made for learning Gorontalo, a language spoken in Indonesia. And so the app is based on a dictionary, which was published first, and it was created by a lecturer in English at the local university. So this is a picture of the cover of the book that the app is based on. But before I talk about the app specifically and how people use it, I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about the languages of Indonesia and about Gorontalo more specifically. So Indonesia has almost 700 languages. More than half of them are Austronesian, so some of them are more closely related than others. And then 36% of them are Papuan languages. So it's incredibly linguistically diverse. And the language policy in Indonesia really varies depending on the region. So in some areas of the country, minority languages are taught in schools, and in other parts they're not at all. But the national language is Bahasa Indonesia, Indonesian language, and everyone in the country pretty much has to speak that in school or for work. And then they also speak a variety of local Malays, which are closely related to Indonesian. So this is Sulawesi, one of the islands of Indonesia, and at the very top of this map in the kind of light blue teal area, that is the Gorontalo region of Indonesia. So that's the area that I'll be talking about. So just some background on the languages of Gorontalo province. So there are several local languages spoken in this one province. Again, Indonesian, the national language, is spoken by pretty much everyone. And then there's also the local Malay, which is confusingly called Gorontalo Malay. So the same name as the language that I'm going to be talking about. And that's the regional lingua franca. So most people in Gorontalo province speak both Indonesian, the national language, as well as Gorontalo Malay. Gorontalo language, however, is the largest local language, and it's actually quite different from Indonesian and from the Malay, and it has maybe 50,000 speakers. And then there are also a few smaller local languages, such as Suwawa and Antigola, which have fewer than 10,000 speakers each. So Gorontalo is by far the largest of the local languages in the province. So when I was in Indonesia, I was there with a Fulbright-funded project to do documentation and description of the Gorontalo language. This is a picture of me with 3 Gorontalo people, and I was recording traditional stories there. And that's my cousin with me, she was helping. And then the other photo is of a traditional ceremony being held in Gorontalo language. And that ceremony was for the opening of a new building at the university. So as you can see from these 2 photos, most people in the area are Muslim, so that's just an interesting cultural feature. So almost everyone's Muslim, and so Gorontalo language is often used in Muslim ceremonies, but not always, and so you have sort of this mixture. And it's still very much being used in traditional ceremonies, although not so much used by younger people or in more modern situations, as we'll see. So some basic information about the Gorontalo language. So like I said, it's spoken in Sulawesi, it's Austronesian. It's spoken in urban areas. So there's a city of Gorontalo, which is a pretty large urban area with 200,000 people. There's some published grammatical description on the language, but not a lot. So that was part of what my project was until the pandemic started and I had to leave. It's very complex morphologically. There are 4 different voices in the language, which can be in some ways maybe intimidating for people to learn. And it is not taught at all in the schools. So as I said before, in Indonesia, whether a language is taught in the schools really depends a lot on the area, and in Gorontalo province it is not taught at all anywhere. Only Indonesian language and then English sometimes are taught in schools. So perhaps in part due to this, there is some language activism in Gorontalo province. So you have a lot of like 30 and 40-year-olds who either do speak the language fluently or they somewhat speak it and their parents speak it fluently, but they see that their children don't really speak it. So there's been a movement to try to get people to start using Gorontalo language in situations outside of the traditional ceremonies. So for example, some language activists, they translated some of the Wikipedia pages into Gorontalo, and they also have been translating other websites, making some YouTube videos. And during the start of COVID, some people were writing poetry about their experiences with the pandemic in Gorontalo language. So there's a lot of that happening. And then of course the app, which I'm going to be talking about. So this is a screenshot, 2 different screenshots from the app. So just to show you how it works. So basically it's a bilingual dictionary between English and Gorontalo. So the dictionary does not have Indonesian language in it really. It's supposed to just be for Gorontalo and for English. So the way the app works is you have like a category of words. So this one is fruit. So you have all these different fruits that you can click on, and it just shows the picture, no words. Buah-buahan means fruits in Indonesian. So like I said, it's mostly bilingual, but there's some Indonesian words thrown in too. So it's almost kind of trilingual. But when you actually click on one of the photos of a fruit, then it brings it up and it has the words in Gorontalo, lange, and then in English, jackfruit, and then no Indonesian. And so that's how it works with, so any of these, if you were to click it, it would give you the fruit's name in both Gorontalo and in English. And there's also a feature to where you can hear the sounds of the language, both the Gorontalo and the English sounds. Just to give you one more example of one of the categories in the app. So this is keluarga, which means family. And so here you have a family tree. And if you click on, say, this woman here, she comes up and it's Ola Aunt. And this one's kind of interesting because you can see the way that the creators are trying to make it more interesting or accessible for younger people. So they have the Simpsons here instead of only traditional Indonesian looking people. So, you know, you have the Simpsons at the top and then you have kind of the Indonesian people down here. And they also, I think, use a K-pop star, like a Korean pop star, as one of the family members too, to try to connect to younger people. So you have both like stuff from, you know, Western culture like The Simpsons, and then also from Korean pop culture, which is very popular in Indonesia at the moment. So what I did was I had several families use this app with their kids during the pandemic when they were stuck at home, basically, with their children. And so I had them use the app with the kids and then distributed a survey to see how they felt about the app and how they used it and what creative ways they thought of to use it in for the future, and then what they think the role of this app could be in Gorontalo language revitalization. So basically, it's good in a way because a lot of the parents are not fluent in Gorontalo themselves. So by using this app with the kids, they're able to use the language together, even if they don't necessarily speak it. All of the kids liked playing with the app. They liked the pictures, especially. Most of them really liked The Simpsons and also the K-pop star. So they found that part fun. The kids also like that it has English in it, because if you think about it, it is a bit odd that they're mixing Gorontalo and English, but one of the effects it has, at least, is it does make it more fun or more appealing maybe to the children who are perhaps more interested in learning English than they are in learning Gorontalo. And then another thing, a lot of the kids thought that the Gorontalo word sounded funny. So I don't know if that's a positive or a negative thing, but that was
4 minutes left. This is Riitta, just warning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like 4 minutes, so then there's time for questions.
Okay, great, thank you. So the future plans for this app. So basically, some of the families, they want to start using the app more with the kids, and they're trying to think of creative games that they can play with the children while using the app. Also, the app is only vocabulary. It's a dictionary app, so that it doesn't have any information about sentences or grammar or anything. So some people want to try to figure out a way to incorporate more grammar into it. I'm not sure how that would work, though, if it would mean like expanding the app itself, like getting the creators to do more, or if it would be creating other apps. Some people also suggested making YouTube videos that could go along with the app, maybe have grammar lessons that could also incorporate the vocabulary that the app has. And then finally, everyone wants Gorontalo to be taught in schools at some point. So this app could maybe be incorporated in a way into lesson plans if the Gorontalo people are able to get Gorontalo language taught in schools in the future. So finally, so the comparison between our two different case studies, and Ari, if you want to chip in at some point. So the contexts are kind of different in a lot of ways. One interesting similarity, though, between our two is that English is used in both. So in Ghana, it's the official language. In Indonesia, it's just like a highly prestigious, important language, but they're used in both of these for these bilingual activities. A major difference is like the tech level, right? So in the Safaliba context, it's a very low tech, it's with books and people doing drawings and everything, whereas with the Gorontalo app, it requires cell phones or a computer, and it's way more high tech. Another big difference is with the Gorontalo app, they're trying to incorporate more like global illustrations. So like I was saying, the Korean ones and having the Simpsons and stuff instead of sticking only to indigenous ones. Although it is interesting too, one of the family members in the family tree is wearing a Javanese hat, and one child complained that grandpa was Javanese instead of Gorontalo. So maybe in a way, trying to make it too global actually backfires, I don't know. And then the sort of the thinking behind designing these things with the Safaliba situation, it's very much informed by second language acquisition studies, whereas with the Gorontalo one, it's more free. So they decided they wanted to try to teach English and Gorontalo at the same time with this app, but it wasn't necessarily based on some sort of language acquisition methodology. And then finally, a big difference has to do with reading, how much people read in the language. So with Safaliba, people might not read as much in any language, whereas in Gorontalo, pretty much everyone can read Indonesian language, standard Indonesian. And so jumping from that to reading the app with the English and Gorontalo words is, it's a different process. So would you like to say anything, Ari?
Just, you made a very good point when you mentioned that, well, you made a point about your dictionary app, which just worked on words and not chunks of language, not phrases, there was no chunking. In the Safaliba dictionary, they did chunk and they did have short sentences because they were conscious of it playing a role in right up the primary school system, even though it only got started in first grade, and I was showing you some of that data, because they thought it would be used for teaching English too. So this transitional bilingual role that it plays in the school. And I don't have any data from the COVID. But yeah, it's interesting.
Great. That is excellent. I'm going to stop your sharing if you don't mind, Colleen.
Yeah.
There we go. And we have time for questions. We started thinking, I was texting Lily here just behind the scenes, that what would have been a better name for this panel? I'm thinking like sound and software, sound and something. So sound, all of you said something about sound. So that was great, all three talks. Yes, any questions?
It's the end of the conference today.
Yeah, but it's in different time zones, and not everyone has been here all day, so there should be some questions. I like the activities with the Ghana and the Salibaba dictionary, that you have pictures and you get them talking. Are there any plans, Ari, what's going to happen next with the dictionary?
Yeah, and it was supposed to happen this past summer, but because of COVID, I couldn't get there. I've been trying to go there. I was also on a Fulbright and lived with the Safaliba for a year. And actually, the dictionary was produced in the relationship building year, which was prior to the Fulbright with the community. So the plans are actually, and as we put in our abstract, to see a sequence of development. The children are very orate in their language. And suddenly then they come to school and it's Gonja, and that's not very similar, okay? And so they become silent. And the teachers, that's what activated the teachers, and that's why they started this project. And basically the most interesting thing is, I think, building on those information gap activities where they talk, and then moving them into things with some words and other, because they already do a lot of little Safaliba words. They have a lot of little Safaliba words. I was able to jump in as a beginner, and the teacher said, I'd like you to, I was participant observer in a class. I'd like you to work with the class. I said, I don't know enough Safaliba. I said, you can do the little words. And so that they have all these games with those. And then the kids were leading the games for the other kids. So all of that work feeds nicely into the way a dictionary is constructed. And again, because we advise them to chunk language, not just do a traditional word for word kind of thing, and put phrases in, it's even useful for reading fluency in the mother tongue, not just the transition to English, which is what the teachers are all keen on.
Yes. So in fact, we have, is it Christina, your talk, your question in the chat, would you like to pose it using audio? Because it relates to what Ari just said.
Yeah, thank you to both of you for these very interesting presentations. The question is in fact for Ari. Sorry, in my own research, I tried to use games, and some of them are a little bit similar to what you've shown, so that was pretty interesting. And I use them mainly for adults, for elicitation, but having in mind that they can be used for kids as well, for language teaching. So I was wondering if you look at it from the other way around. You have the primary objective for the language acquisition, but whether they can be used for adults as well.
Oh, definitely. And there's a farmer who, after work, on the wall of his house, his mud wall, he painted black, and he has one light bulb hanging there, and adults bring plastic chairs after work and learn to read with him. And yeah, there's definitely use there. I again, am not back in the community enough to get them talking about it, but it's definitely, it's a very low-tech community. I mean, the teachers, that teacher actually isn't very much online, but the adult education teacher.
Yeah, so it's a big contrast between the two communities. One is very high-tech and the other one. I have time for one question, and if I'm playing by the rules, I should let Lily Khan ask her question because she posted first, and Sarah, maybe Ari can answer in the chat. I'm sorry. So Lily, what was your question?
So just a quick question. You might have mentioned this, but I was curious about the YouTube videos, because you said, you mentioned that there was interest in that and that might be a possible next thing to develop. So I was just, if you had a chance to kind of consider what kind of content you might produce for those.
Oof, yeah, that's a very good question. I I have no idea, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. Like right now there are YouTube videos of like basically recordings of traditional ceremonies and stuff like that, but that's not the kind of thing that's going to, I think, be exciting for younger people. So yeah, I really don't know. I don't think there are any concrete plans in the community at the moment to make them. It's something they talk about and that they say they would like, but I don't think there are any actual plans yet to do it. But that's a good question, something to be thinking about these days.
Thank you. I'm just double check Sarah's question whether we have time for it. No, Ari has answered it. Great. Thank you for today. We're all big champions. Some of us have been here all day, others some of the day. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think Lily has too. Lily has an announcement to make, and I have one as well.
Yes, so just a quick announcement about the concert. Somebody was asking whether or not we could get a song list, and so Paulina has sent us a song list, and that will be posted on the conference webpage sometime tomorrow as soon as our administrator gets it.